Hello, I'm Darren again. Today's the second part in a short series looking at how narcissistic people gain and maintain control over others. Previously, I'd outlined the different ways they can problematize pretty much anything just to cause chaos, confuse, and guilt trip. Today, I'm going to look at how they use language. I'm going to look at this in different ways. I'm going to look at how they employ emotive language. I'm also going to look at the manipulation of language and the use of linguistic ambiguity. So, let's get started. Narcissistic people often employ emotive arguments to manipulate and coerce other people into complying with their desires and their viewpoints, especially when they don't have any evidence, any facts, logic, or reason to back up their positions. They use emotionally charged language to appeal to other people's emotions. They can create a sense of urgency to evoke strong feelings in their targets, which can make it more difficult for them to think rationally or critically. Now, at a low level, their targets might hear things like, "I'm shocked that you would think that," or "I can't believe that you would do that." They might even hear questions like, "How could you be so heartless?" They can portray themselves as being morally virtuous, which means by default anyone who doesn't see things their way are evil. And they're often spoken to and treated with outrage and indignation. But there is also appealing to fear. They use fear-inducing language to manipulate others into acting in certain ways or making specific decisions. Now, a typical example could be, "If you don't do what I say, you'll end up alone and miserable," or "You will lose your job," or "Others will think you're an awful, horrible person." But fear-inducing language usually involves exaggerating potential consequences or threats to make their target feel anxious or vulnerable. Another tactic is guilt tripping. They either play the victim or they exaggerate the victimhood of others. But they use guilt as a tool to manipulate by making others feel responsible for their emotional state or well-being, even when it's unwarranted. Portraying themselves as victims often garners sympathy and manipulates other people into providing them with compliance, attention, support, and validation. But what they really do is they target their victim's conscience as well as their fear of public opinion, which is why people often hear comments like, "If your family knew what you were really like," or "What if your workmates knew the kind of person you really are?" So I believe that more often than not, what they're really saying is, "If other people knew the version of you I have created in my head," or "If other people knew about the things I blame you for." But by leveraging emotive arguments, narcissistic people seek to exploit their targets' vulnerabilities, manipulate their emotions, and coerce them into compliance. Moving on, another tactic often employed is conflated language. They blur the boundaries between concepts or ideas to manipulate other people's perceptions or to justify their actions. They combine unrelated issues or distort facts just to suit their narrative. Now, an example could be when they raise past arguments with current disagreements, and this makes it difficult for their partner to address specific issues or to hold them accountable. Or they'll draw attention to someone's past errors as evidence of them being wrong today. Another tactic is to manipulate the use of language or restrict the use of certain words. For instance, if they agreed to be somewhere at, say, 7 o'clock and they didn't turn up till maybe 10:30, the other person's not allowed to say that they're late. The word late is far too triggering for them. It reminds them of their late great-great-great-uncle's cousin who died back in 1903. So their target has to try to find a different word to tell them they're late. To paraphrase author Philip K. Dick, if you control the use of language, you control those who have to use the language. But another way they use language to control is just by using jargon. For example, using specialized language or terminology. They do it just to appear knowledgeable and authoritative, even if they don't know what the terms actually mean. But the jargon is aimed to either confuse or impress others. If others don't understand, as far as they're concerned, they're just far too stupid to engage with. But they do the same when they just use gobbledygook, commonly referred to as word salad. Personally, I think gobbledygook is a better term. Let's call it what it is. But this is deliberately vague, ambiguous, or nonsensical language to confuse or overwhelm their targets. They engage in nonsensical, circular reasoning, making it difficult for others to understand, never mind challenge or question them. It often includes words, phrases, and slogans that don't actually mean anything. They string together complex sentences filled with buzzwords and empty rhetoric, making it hard for other people to understand what's being communicated, never mind respond coherently. Next, narcissistic people often use euphemistic language to soften the impact of their words or their actions, to downplay their mistakes, or to avoid taking responsibility. Now, an example could be if they're challenged about the consequences of their own poor choices, well, they might respond with something like, mistakes were made, or there were extenuating circumstances, which isn't quite the same thing as, I got it wrong. But euphemisms are a way to avoid accountability and shift blame elsewhere, without actually pointing the finger at anyone. Next, there are vague promises or commitments. They can imply things but leave room for interpretation just to avoid any kind of concrete obligation, and this allows them to maintain flexibility and evade accountability. So they might promise to help someone, but they don't specify how. There's no clear actions or timelines. Sticking with being vague, there can also be ambiguous criticism. This involves criticizing others using vague or ambiguous language, making it difficult for other people to address or refute the criticism effectively. So they might make an accusation, you know what you did, everyone knows what you did, but they don't specify the behaviour or the issue that's being criticized, and their target has to try to figure it out in their head while they refuse to give any further information. But narcissistic people often use technical, ambiguous, or nonsensical language, or language with double meanings, to confuse and to mislead others, and this allows them to shift interpretations depending on the context or their own agenda. But it sows doubt in the minds of others, making it easier for them to manipulate perceptions and control situations. Lastly, there's when they withhold information. Now, when a narcissist withholds crucial details or context when communicating with others, it does leave room for ambiguity, but it allows them also to control the narrative. Now, this could involve telling people about someone else's reactions, but no mention to their behaviour that caused the reactions. Or it could be withholding important information, such as the deadline for that is Friday, just to sabotage them. But often, by withholding certain, sometimes important information, their target doesn't have all the facts, so they're unable to make informed decisions. Quite often end up facing consequences they weren't aware of. So to summarise, narcissistic people do have this need for control and domination over others, but if they were honest about their intent, well, they probably wouldn't get very far. By leveraging linguistic ambiguity, nonsensical gobbledygook, technical jargon, emotive arguments, they can gain and maintain control over narratives, other people, and situations. By using various linguistic tactics, they can manipulate perceptions and behaviours to serve their own interests and avoid facing consequences for their actions. By leveraging emotive arguments, they can exploit their target's vulnerabilities, manipulate their emotions, and coerce them into compliance. And as I often say, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So that's a brief outline of how narcissistic people manipulate language in order to control other people. But as always, please feel free to add anything I might have missed in the comments section. Next time, I'm going to look at how narcissistic people use and exploit rules to dominate and control. In the meantime, if you find this topic to be interesting, please consider subscribing, and until next time, thanks for watching.